The Florida Panthers dropped the third game of this 3-game road trip to start the season, going 2-1-0 on the trip. But we have a lot more questions to ask about the roster at this point in time after dropping the third game 5-3 against the Boston Bruins. We're going to discuss that next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast.
Your Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
And welcome into this Tuesday, October 18th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez, and you can follow me on Twitter at Monoman12. Follow the show account on Twitter at LO_FLA Panthers. Don't forget to also subscribe to Locked On Fantasy Hockey with Flip Livingstone and Steel Roden and Locked On NHL will be covering all the regular season activities around the National Hockey League. So, Cats fans, Monday night sucked. It really did. And just to think that the Panthers started off the season 2-0-0, we recapped Thursday's game against the New York Islanders with Nick Fairbanks. Didn't really get a chance to talk about Saturday's win against Buffalo Sabres. And off to a great start. The Panthers get 2 power play goals in that one. The Panthers are retrieving pucks around the net. But with this one, it was just really disaster from the start for the Panthers, where the thing is, when the Panthers hit the ice in morning skate, I mean, I'm not in Boston right now, but there wasn't even really anything reported on lines or who was missing from morning skate. And then when the Panthers hit warmups, Brandon Montour is missing from warmups for the Panthers. And that's just a big shakeup all around. I mean, sure, a lot of the Panthers players are used to playing 70, an odd number, but of course, 7's a lot different than 5. You're going to log more minutes. You're going to have a different D partner, probably some double shifting in between. So credit to the Panthers for, in that situation, that they didn't get a too many men on the ice call, because there could have been a situation to where they could have been a miscommunication with, oh, am I supposed to play with this guy on this shift, or am I supposed to play him on the next shift and then I double shift? So credit to Panthers that didn't happen in the game. But the worst part of it is, not only did they dress 19 skaters, but Aaron Ekblad goes down in the middle of the second period in what he gave up a turnover in the offensive zone. Jake DeBrusk takes it all the way and then gets it to Patrice Bergeron. At that time was a 2-1 game for the Bruins. And again, disaster from the start. Jake DeBrusk, by the way, on Monday was his birthday. So 26th birthday for him, and he gets 3 points for the Boston Bruins. Scores 21 seconds into the game. Gus Forsling with the bad turnover, and then Jake DeBrusk takes it all the way. And to think that Jake DeBrusk for the Boston Bruins, he was trying to get out of Boston after the relationship kind of fell off with Bruce Cassidy. And then they give him an extension. Jim Montgomery comes in, kind of a second chance for Jim Montgomery after his tenure in Dallas didn't go so well. And a great night for Jake DeBrusk, a great night for David Pastrnak. He's up for a contract next year. He's going to earn every single dollar of that contract that he's going to get. And to think that on the other side for the Bruins, there's no Charlie McAvoy, no Brad Marchand, no Brandon Carlo as well. And the Panthers couldn't take advantage. And this is why, when we had our betting show with Jack Bond of Paramount Sports, to stay away from that over-under for the Boston Bruins. So Boston, not a team that's going to go away. And there were there were chances though for the Panthers in this one, and just the for the Panthers, the thing is, it's just really every single game really throughout the first 3 games, there has been at least one goal that Mark Stahl has been responsible for. I mean, the first goal on Saturday against Buffalo, you see he just falls, and then Alex Tuch scores for the first goal of the game for Buffalo, and then just for this one, the goal that was to give the Boston Bruins the 3-1 lead at the time, just gets by Mark Stahl, and then Sergei Bobrovsky was a little too low, and then Pastrnak goes high. Excuse me, he goes 5-hole, on Bobrovsky, if I remember correctly. But still, the Panthers, all the questions about their blue line and about the rushes that this team could give up, leaving their goalies out to dry, they've all been valid throughout this offseason. And Mark Stahl, the age has kind of shown for him, and just constantly getting beat. And plus minus for him, not the end all be all, but says -2 on the season for him. But you just look at the eye test for Mark Stahl, and even that, if you look at, we talked about it on Thursday night / Friday's episode for Locked On Panthers, how that Gudas penalty was caused by a Stahl turnover. And really that Stahl play from Pastrnak, Stahl had a great board battle that caused Anton Lundell to have his own rush going the other way, starting in the neutral zone for the Panthers too. So I didn't really have to call Mark Stahl's name really at all until that point in time for the Panthers. But the Panthers, regardless of all of that, being down 4-1 at most, they kept fighting. Colin White had many great opportunities around the net, on the doorstep on a turnover created by Anton Lundell. Sam Reinhart, as the Boston Bruins were trying to exit the zone, it's checked out of a Boston player's stick. I forget who it was. And then Reinhart is all by himself on Linus Ullmark. 2, Sam Bennett had on the PK, there was a time where Sergei Bobrovsky was like flat on his stomach, and then on the PK, Sam Bennett gets the puck out of the zone to clear the puck. So there's a few good individual performances here, but just with the Panthers being shorthanded, it was just too much to overcome for the Panthers. And even very early in the game, they had a 5-on-3 for a little bit, and Pastrnak had a great breakup on a 2-on-1 that Sam Bennett and Rudolph Balcers had earlier in the first period. But I did think that penalty, the tripping call on Aaron Ekblad, was a little bit of a soft one, but still, when you're only playing 5 defensemen and one of your defensemen goes to the penalty box, it's kind of hard for the Panthers. Ekblad gets hurt, and then in the third period, Forsling goes to the box for his interference call, and then it's like, okay, 3 defensemen to play. Are you going to play Stahl and Gudas the whole time on the PK? Didn't see Josh Mahura really on that last PK for the Panthers. At least I don't remember seeing Josh Mahura out there on that last one. And even prior to the injury, Ekblad getting a little slow to get back after turning it over. DeBrusque gets it to Bergeron, and just really a tough night overall for the Panthers. It was always going to be a very hard one to overcome. And Sergei Bobrovsky, not all the goals were his fault, but that 4th one by Trent Frederick, just a little late hugging the post, and it was always going to be tough for the Panthers. But Colin White, 2nd straight game with a goal. As the Panthers, you think about never giving up, and when the Panthers were on the power play with about 5 minutes to go, getting the extra skater on for the 6-on-4, even though they didn't get the goal on the 6-on-4, they got it on 6-on-5. Colin White's right in front of the net. The goal that he had against Buffalo right in front of the slot, and that's a positive for the Panthers. But just a very tough night due to injuries with the cap, a depleted Boston team versus a depleted Florida team. The depleted Boston team, they have all the confidence in the world that when Marchand, McAvoy, Carlo, and Muzik come back for the Bruins. So there's a lot of there. If you're a Boston Bruins fan right now, there is many reasons to be optimistic after a game like this. And if you're a Panthers fan, this loss for the Panthers, it's going to be a tough one tonight. But as long as the news for Aaron Ekblad is positive, then it might not be as bad as it looked. But 20 rostered players for this team, it's a little bit of a tough pill for this team to swallow right now. And the other one that was missing, I was blanking on the name. It was Matt Grzelcyk that was missing for the Boston Bruins tonight. That was the other player that was missing for them. So just a tough night, but we still don't have any news on the Aaron Ekblad injury. We do have a little bit of news on Brandon Montour, and we're going to discuss that next on this edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. But first, we're going to tell you all about Built Bar. And if you haven't tried Built Bar Puffs yet, you are depriving yourself of one of life's greatest joys. And guess what? There's a new flavor. Ready? Delicious, indulgent cookie dough covered in chocolate. That's right. Built has done it again. Let me introduce you to your new favorite. Cookie dough chunk puffs have a light and chewy texture. Real cookie dough chunks. And of course, they're covered in 100% real chocolate. All the joys of eating cookie dough without the hassle of making it. Plus, it's healthy for you. Cookie dough chunk puffs are only 160 calories, and they have a whopping 15 grams of protein in them. Run to Built.com and snag a box for you and the family. It'll be the perfect treat. Or you can find a really good hiding place and just hoard them for yourself. Go to Built.com and use promo code LOCKEDON15 to get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCKEDON15 for 15% off at Built.com. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. Now make your second listen of the day Locked On Game to Game NHL. Every moment, every top performance, every result. Locked On Game to Game covers every game across the NHL with local analysis that only Locked On can deliver. Follow Game to Game on Locked On NHL, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get podcasts. So, despite the loss and everything, we didn't even get to mention that Matthew Tkachuk consistently generating offense and consistently having activity mostly every single time the whistle blows. And that double minor that was given to Tkachuk after that knee on Rodolphe Balcers is just freaking ridiculous. And I don't know how the Florida Panthers went on the power play when Matthew Tkachuk was just trying to stand up for his teammate in Rodolphe Balcers. And let's not forget we're used to great passes as well for goals, but let's talk about that pass to Sam Bennett as he's cutting backdoor and gets it at the time to tie the game. But Panthers never led in this one, and it was just a matter of chasing the game the whole night. And 20 roster players with plus an injury will do that. And despite all that, the Panthers came back. Gus Forsling got a goal from the blue line as well to cut it to 4-2 at the time with a lot of traffic, puck retrieval for the Panthers. A board battle that was won by Colin White, I believe. So Colin White has been a really good acquisition for the Panthers. I'm very impressed by what I've seen out of Colin White through 3 games. But just like when there's an injury, especially for your quarterback of the power play, the defense gets shaken up, the power play gets shaken up. Paul Maurice went with 5 forwards at one point during this game towards the tail end, and it just creates so many different. You have to communicate a little differently when you do have one less guy, especially if there's an odd number on the D pairs, and that just makes it just a really difficult night for overall for the team. But Paul Maurice did speak after the game about the statuses of Brandon Montour and Aaron Ekblad, and said that doesn't believe anything will be long term with Montour. So hopefully we'll be able to see the quarterback of the power play back in the lineup, hopefully on Wednesday, which will be the Panthers home opener on TNT. No confirmation on who's going to be doing play-by-play and color commentary on that game just yet. I'm going to assume it's Kenny Albert and Eddie Olczyk. I'm going to assume it's those two. But Aaron Ekblad, though. There's no practice for the Panthers on Tuesday. They'll be flying a red-eye flight back to South Florida and taking a day off. So anything about the media being near the Panthers will happen Wednesday. So we'll know all the answers by Wednesday. And you see the replay when Aaron Ekblad turned the puck over to Jake DeBrusk. You see Aaron Ekblad only using one leg to try to skate off the ice, and the other leg is just little stiff. So don't want to speculate on any injuries neither. I just hope that for him, especially the last 2 seasons where mid-March Ekblad goes down, and it really kind of put it takes the breath out of the fan base and the team for when Aaron Ekblad goes down. That's your number 1 defenseman, of course, number 1 overall pick, a guy who's been here for a long time. But the truth is, the last few seasons he's struggled with injuries, and you hate to see it for a guy, especially a guy this important to your team. And right now, the Panthers, we're holding our breaths right now, but we don't have a official update for Aaron Ekblad and his status on what's going to happen from here on out. But we have to discuss some scenarios. This cannot be avoided, because 20 players on a roster is not sustainable. And I get it. You're up against the cap, a $10 million goalie. Patrick Hornquist is making around 5.3 and less than $1 million in cap space, which you can't even bring someone up right now at this moment in time. So the Panthers have some options to explore. They have to. You can't dress 19 guys on Wednesday and then again on Friday against the Tampa Bay Lightning. But at the same time, we knew that these were going to be the struggles of the buyout, the majority of Keith Yandle's buyout this year. We knew. And what were we saying during the offseason? Let's go back. What were a lot of Panther fans saying? That the Panthers should try to find a way to trade Patrick Hornquist. And it's not anything against the guy. It's just the cap hit is a little large. And there's also a portion of the fan base that has said trade Sergei Bobrovsky. But I got to be realistic here. Sergei Bobrovsky's no movement clause doesn't become a modified no trade clause until July 1, 2024. So trading Bobrovsky, not an option. It's not an option right now. So who? And the answer is someone that we've spoken about all summer, Patrick Hornquist. And the fact that only 20 players and one injury happens, there has to be a solution to the Panthers being able to fit more than 20 on their roster, because this is going to smell trouble all year for this team. And the worst part is I'm discussing this with the Panthers being 2-1-0 great start to the season, regardless. But I'm trying to look a little further ahead for this team, despite being 2-1-0. Past this game. Listen, this game is in the rearview mirror now. I pretty much got over it. As soon as the empty goal hit, I thought there was a chance for a comeback. Don't get me wrong, but once that empty net hit, I'm like, okay, on to Philly. But at the same time, there's questions about the roster, just not even the talent on the roster, but the bodies and putting a certain amount of bodies together. Because it's not if injuries happen, it's when injuries happen. And look what happened. Not one, two defensemen go down. How do you create the room? Well, I don't wish LTIR for Aaron Ekblad because I want to see him play. I want the Panthers to be a fully healthy squad. So what's another scenario if the Panthers don't put Ekblad on LTIR? You might have to consider putting Patrick Hornquist on waivers. You might have to. That's enough space to bring 3 people up from Charlotte. A forward and 1 or 2 defensemen. The 3 names I could think of on the top of my head are Heponiemi, Lucas Carlson, are just a few. Maybe a Grigori Denisenko. Maybe a John Ludwig can make his NHL debut. Maybe. But 20 players on a roster, ladies and gentlemen, that is asking for trouble. And this was always going to be tough. I mean, the Panthers couldn't even have the space to bring in Eric Stahl after his PTO. And it's only going to get harder when Anthony Duclair comes back. Another player I would also consider bringing back, Matt Kiersted, if he's healed from his injury, of course, which he's on season opening IR. A lot of questions for this team right now. As far as they could win on Wednesday with 19 players. They could win on Friday with 19 players. But this won't be something that the Panthers can consistently do over and over again throughout the season, because you're only going to smell more trouble, and the contract of Hornquist is only going to create more problems in the long run of this season more than it is going to be a solution. As great as Hornquist is as a leader on the team, he was on power play 1 today for the Panthers, being shifted up with Aaron Ekblad running the point. And that's another example of when you don't have the quarterback on the power play, what happens next? Who's going to run the point? Who's going to take shots from the left circle? Now with Aaron Ekblad shifting up, it's valid. It's a valid thing to ask, though. And there's a lot of shakeups so early for this team. And again, they're 2-1-0. And there's these questions. Just a not so good night injury-wise, but keeping it close, though. It's a no-quit approach from Paul Maurice, and that's why I'm in favor of him being the coach. You could even listen to the episode where the day prior to him being hired that I was a proponent of Paul Maurice being the coach for the Panthers. And even with 5 minutes left and saying, nope, they're not going to go down without a fight. That's encouraging. That is encouraging. But there's only so much that you can do with 20 players. That's really what it comes down to. Okay, that's out of the way. we got all that out as far as discussing the game, the injuries. But in segment number 3, we are going to go around the NHL and across the Atlantic Division around scores. We're going to discuss that next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast.
Your Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Third and final segment here on this Tuesday, October 18th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, where the Florida Panthers fall to the Boston Bruins by a final score of 5-3. And just quickly looking at the time on ice for the Panthers, as far as defensemen especially, just quickly. And Aaron Ekblad, even when he went down with his injury, 15 minutes of ice time prior to that. So they were already going to log a lot of minutes, the defenseman. Mark Stahl finishes with 21 minutes of time on ice. Mahura with 19 minutes and 37 seconds. Gus Forsling with 28 minutes of time on ice. And Radko Gudas with 21 minutes. So once again, just something that you're going to – these defensemen are going to be tired out if Aaron Ekblad is out for an extended period of time. So it's encouraging still, once again, that Brandon Montour doesn't seem, at least according to Coach Maurice, that it's not going to be something that the Panthers, he won't be out for an extended period of time. But let's go around the league. And nobody's having a worse night, though, than the Toronto Maple Leafs. We didn't get to really discuss this yet, but Matt Murray is hurt again. Got hurt in morning skate, left the ice, and now it's the Ilya Samsonov for the Leafs and Eric Källgren. And Eric Källgren, on 19 shots, they lose to the Coyotes by a final score of 4-2. Jeff Petrie, in his return to Montreal, actually gets booed at Bell Center in Montreal. And Kirby Dach, who's getting a second chance in the NHL, gets a power play goal to win it for the Montreal Canadiens over the Pittsburgh Penguins. Washington Capitals, Alex Ovechkin, one step closer to history, gets a goal tonight, and the Washington Capitals defeat the Vancouver Canucks by a score of 6-4. The LA Kings go into Detroit and defeat the Detroit Red Wings by a final score 5-4. And their game prior to that on Saturday, Kevin Fiala made his return to Minnesota, and he got 3 points in his return in a wild game in Minnesota. Avalanche defeat the Minnesota Wild by a final score of 6-3. So the Colorado Avalanche are continuing their dominance as they did last season. Stars defeat the Jets by a final score of 4-1, and the Rangers defeat the Anaheim Ducks by a final score of 6-4. The Rangers are showing that last year was no fluke. They're showing that real quick. And Anaheim, Frank Vetrano gets on the board again for the Anaheim Ducks. He scored on their opening night too. So, and looks like that Capo Caco and Alexis Lafreniere, looks like that the step that they took in the conference final, it looks like it's going to be another step that they're going to take this year for the Rangers. And really, the development of two top 2 picks is going to be really crucial for this team if they want really any success. Right now, games in progress as this is recording. The Carolina Hurricanes are up on the Seattle Kraken by a score of 1-0 in the middle of the second period. Seth Jarvis has scored for the Canes, so another Eastern Conference favorite up ahead in their game. So where does the Atlantic stand now for the Panthers? Right now, third in the division behind Detroit and Boston. But of course, these numbers are skewed at the beginning of the season. Save percentage is skewed. Goals against average is skewed. I mean, Marc-Andre Fleury, his goals against average are really damn skewed. It's like over 8 goals against average right now for Fleury. That'll go down eventually, at least, hopefully. But the Minnesota Wild are in deep trouble right now to start the season. And they traded Cam Talbot to the Ottawa Senators, who Cam Talbot's now hurt, missing 5 to 7 weeks. So not a good situation in Minnesota right now. But the Panthers, going back to the Panthers, this is the time to regroup. The Philadelphia Flyers, though, they'll be doing 2 straight home openers on the road. By the time they face the Panthers, it'll be the second end of a back-to-back for the Flyers. The second end will be in Sunrise on Wednesday, while they play against the Tampa Bay Lightning on Tuesday night. So this is really important. The Flyers off to a great start for the season, despite missing Sean Couturier, Rasmus Ristolainen, and actually Owen Tippett's actually hurt too. So we likely won't be seeing Owen Tippett in his return to Florida on Wednesday night against the Flyers. And listen, there's a sense of urgency type of season for the Philadelphia Flyers. So really important that they get off to a good start. Right now they're 2-0, 2 wins. One of them, I believe, was against the Devils, and I forget what the other one was against. I think their second win was against the Canucks, if I'm not mistaken. But time to regroup. If Carter Hart does in fact start against the Tampa Bay Lightning on Tuesday, that'll be a nationally televised game. So actually, all of us will be able to watch it, at least in the U.S. If Carter Hart happens to start against the Tampa Bay Lightning on Tuesday, then chances are we'll see Felix Sandstrom, the Flyers' third-round pick from the 2015 draft, that's only played 5 games in the NHL. So chances are we could be seeing a backup goaltender on Wednesday night when the Panthers do host the Philadelphia Flyers on Wednesday. So it's going to be fun. The Panthers fan base is, I'm sure, very fired up after the season that they had last year. A chance to raise the President's Trophy banner on Wednesday night at FLA Live Arena, a first for all of us who have been following this team, and really something to reflect on for the season. I know it's still very painful about what happened as far as the finish last season, but really still something to really look back on as far as just an overall just fun season. So looking forward to that. Tomorrow's episode of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, we'll be bringing in Jacob Winans for another Winans Wednesday edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. We're going to talk about our concerns, of course, about this team, and also some positives about this team through 3 games, because since Jacob's last appearance on the show, there have been 3 games. So we'll be bringing him in for him to give his thoughts on the first 3 games of the season. But in the meantime, if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast and YouTube feed. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On NHL, where they'll be covering all the regular season activities around the National Hockey League. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. And for your second listen of the day, make sure to listen to today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Hockey. Steel Roden and Flip Livingstone bring you the fantasy edge and keep you ahead of the competition with daily updates of news, analysis, and advice Monday through Friday. Available on YouTube, Odyssey, or wherever you get podcasts. So I'm Armando Velez, signing off. And you've been listening to the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We're your team every day.